This episode is brought to you by the Arvada Center, because they're putting on a zany, fresh, funny fairy tale musical just for the holidays. Once Upon a Mattress plays from November 22nd through December 29th. Enjoy this laugh-out-loud musical version of The Princess and the Pea. Once Upon a Mattress presents a new kind of fairy tale princess who stays true to who she is and what makes her unique. It also features incredible music, tons of laughs, and it's perfect for families. They're even offering specially priced tickets for kids ages 4 and up. Tickets are available now at arvadacenter.org. That's arvadacenter.org. Today on CityCast Denver. It's Election Day, so we've got the journalist who's covered more Denver elections than any other, Westward editor Patty Calhoun, to preview the inevitable madness. Patty joins me and producer Paul Caroli to talk about the fallout from Colorado's election security breach, 2 recent revolts against Denver's public transit decisions, and a comment from a Denver listener who says he's voting for Trump. Today is Tuesday, November 5th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Producer Paul Caroli, hello.
Hey, Bree, good morning.
And Westward editor Patty Calhoun, hi.
Hi.
So it's Election Day. We have to acknowledge that.
The calm before the storm.
Yes, before the insanity that we're going to be getting into all night long. Well, that's what we're going to start with, is around the country, we've heard these reports of ballot boxes being set on fire and claims of voter fraud swirling across social media. But here in Colorado, we're still sort of watching the fallout of the security breach in the office of Colorado's top elections official, which is the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold. Paul, can you give like the too long didn't read version of what happened last week with Jenna Griswold?
Yeah, I can try. This was our version of that here in Colorado. Some people are calling it a major security breach. But what happened was on Tuesday, the Colorado Republican Party put out a press release and they said, hey, on the Secretary of State's website, there's a spreadsheet, and all you have to do is click unhide, and you can see a bunch of passwords to election systems across the state. Turns out, Jenna Griswold and her team in the office had known that this spreadsheet was on the website for maybe about a week, and hadn't done anything about it. But as soon as the Republican Party put out this press release, the news was all like, oh my God, how could this possibly happen? People were freaked out. Everyone's asking, like, are our elections secure? Griswold, of course, responds and says, these are partial passwords. This is 1/2 of the 2-password login system that you need to get into these systems. You also have to be in person. There was no actual breach here, but everyone was saying, should Jenna Griswold resign? How is this going to affect the polls? Are people going to feel less confident? And then, you can expect this has all been rung through the partisan ringer at this point. So I don't know where you all are at.
It was her fault for not alerting the county clerks. Those had been there for 4 months, right? And she finds out about it. Finally, the Republicans get to break it because she hadn't taken care of it.
Do you think she held off on saying anything because she didn't want it to become a big story, or why?
Well, then that was naive because look, she'd already called a press conference to talk about 11 ballots in Mesa County, which had been which had been voted on. She called that press conference on Mesa County without telling the clerk in Mesa County she was doing it. So she surely should have done the same thing, be completely open and transparent early, talk to the clerks first, obviously talk to Polis, looked like it came as a big surprise to him. We have the gold standard in elections, allegedly, in this town and in this state, and she tarnished it just by dealing badly with the situation. I think it's true that there is no danger that there's really a security breach. They changed the passwords. Her explanation when she finally gave it seems pretty sound, but she made a major misstep just allowing the rumors to keep going.
And I also think, we talked about this on Friday, but the whole situation with her bringing some partisanship to this office, which was a break from her predecessor, Wayne Williams, didn't really do that. He was a Republican. I was
going to ask, because I don't remember, Patty, was Wayne, I know
Wayne lost to Jenna, but Wayne, he then was on the city council in Colorado Springs. Wayne did a commercial with Jenna after he lost, after the 2020 election, saying the elections are fair. So he, talk about nonpartisan, he went out to Mesa County. He replaced Tina Peters on a temporary basis. Even he, who has never said bad things, said some bad things in this case. very upset that the clerks weren't told. Matt Crane, the head of the clerks, another person who is very restrained.
Well, these are folks that are in really stressful situations right now.
They don't need to have false rumors and surprises.
Well, here's what I was getting to with the partisanship of this office, which she has created. I mean, as we know, she cheered along the effort to get Trump off the ballot here earlier this year that went to the Supreme Court. But we learned on Friday, since we last recorded an episode of the podcast, Denver 7 reported this, that GOP party chair Dave, let's go Brandon Williams, said where he got the info to
That's
put out.
what we wanted to know,
This
right?
is a big question. He said that it was from a whistleblower inside Jenna Griswold's office. So an elections worker who was aware of this spreadsheet and these passwords being public let him know.
Told the GOP.
And created even more uncertainty. I mean, this was someone who was disgruntled, clearly.
Well, maybe had waited to see if his boss would take care of it.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, my wife used to work in elections here in Denver.
Right.
And I just know, like, through the grapevine that Jenna Griswold is not seen as someone who's got the, a popular approach within the elections security community.
That's interesting. Paul, maybe Patty, you brought up Polis. Paul, what did Polis's weight in?
I loved this. Polis's press release in response to this whole situation. Because after Griswold goes and does a couple of interviews, tries to clean up her own mess, everyone's calling for her to resign. I found her interviews to be very defensive, very haughty. She was doing a lot of sighing, I thought. But anyway, Polis comes in after we recorded our Friday show. This is a press release on Thursday where he basically, I don't know what it sounds like to you, but it sounds to me like he was declaring war. Today, Governor Polis announced that the executive branch is providing the Secretary of State human capital, air and ground assets, and other logistical support to complete changes to all the impacted passwords and review logs, blah, 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 blah. He's talking about changing passwords on some
we're
systems.
We're going to take them out in the field and we're going to blow them up.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start again. Like, what is he describing?
Air and ground assets. I thought that was really funny. But also, I as a voter, I like hearing that my ballot's going to be safe.
And that by Friday, they said all the passwords have been changed, everything's secure. But I'm assuming this came to as a surprise to him, too. Whistleblowers leak to unusual people.
That was my question, was why that avenue?
It's very possible that, and we don't know who this whistleblower is. I think they've said that person no longer works for the Secretary of State's office, but
that's right.
Maybe they were tired of waiting for action to be taken.
The person responsible for putting the spreadsheet out in public, they no
they're
longer
the one,
work there.
Yeah.
The whistleblower, I don't think we know.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I mean, they got Dave Williams' phone number, so interesting. Do either of you think this is going to have an impact on the elections here in Denver?
We are going to be hearing about it forever because every possible rumor has been pulled on the voting issues. And we had just done a story last week, kind of recapping all the election deniers, everything that had been linked to Colorado with Dominion and everything else. So I have to say, I was a little peeved about this because even though it doesn't seem to have any effect on the ultimate integrity of Colorado's elections, it's going to spread the same rumors that we've been listening to for 4 years. It's going to endanger clerks
Especially
and people who work in the offices.
This conspiracy theory heavy environment that we're in politics.
Tensions are already high.
8 years,
Although my father-in-law asked me, I was up watching the Broncos get shellacked by Baltimore over the weekend. My father-in-law asked me, he lives in Longmont. He was like, "Have you heard anything about like violence or like rallies or protests or anything in Denver?" And I had to tell him, no.
I haven't either.
And that's different from 4 years ago, from 2 years ago.
That's a good point.
We used to hear a lot about from like the Joe Oltmann types here about like Proud Boys organizing or like, people showing up at ballot boxes ready for
check
violence.
With Heidi Beetle is what I'm thinking.
I mean, maybe Heidi's heard something we haven't heard, but I have not heard a peep about that.
I haven't either.
Or maybe they've gotten better about keeping it quiet.
Maybe.
Since
Perhaps.
Since January 6th.
They got their own air and ground assets ready to go.
New details about the election security breach emerged inside a courtroom hours after we recorded this episode. The Colorado Libertarian Party is taking legal action against the Secretary of State's office, calling for a hand recount in any county with exposed passwords. At an emergency hearing in the case on Monday afternoon, conservative activist Sean Smith testified that he, not a whistleblower in the Secretary of State's office, discovered the exposed passwords and alerted the Colorado Republican Party. According to Quentin Young of Colorado Newsline, Smith was among the crowds of conservative rioters that clashed with Capitol Police in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. An independent investigation into the case is underway. We will keep you updated on the whole situation as it develops. This episode is brought to you by the Denver Botanic Gardens. Experience a magical mile-high tradition with Blossoms of Light at Denver Botanic Gardens, running nightly from November 20th through January 12th. Wander through a mile of immersive luminous displays that accentuate and highlight the garden's versatile plant collection. Stay toasty with warm drinks and holiday treats throughout your visit. Looking for somewhere to take that someone special or the perfect spot to gather with old friends? Blossoms of Light at the Denver Botanic Gardens is the perfect atmosphere for enjoying this festive holiday season. Also, for the holiday season being so frantic, this is like a very calm, chill place to enjoy a beautiful winter night, especially after it snows. It's the only time I really like to be outside in the snow. Blossoms of Light. Tickets must be purchased online in advance. None will be available at the door. Member ticket sales start November 6th, and public ticket sales start on November 11th at botanicgardens.org. That's botanicgardens.org, or see our show notes for more information. This episode is brought to you by Pine Melon. As the weather cools down, Pine Melon has everything you need to embrace fall. From peak season produce like apples, squash, and pears to seasonal decor like gourds and pumpkins, they've got you covered year-round. Pine Melon proudly partners with over 200 local farmers, ranchers, and producers across Colorado, delivering fresh, high-quality meats, baked goods, pantry staples, and more right to your door. No subscription needed. And that means you have access to same-day delivery in Denver and Boulder within a 2-hour window. Go to pinemelon.com to order locally sourced food today. Customers can use the code CityCastDenver at checkout for $35 off your first order of $75 or more. Join the movement today and support local makers and farmers at pinemelon.com. That's pinemelon.com. Let's switch gears and because we're going to be talking about the election a lot the rest of the week for sure. But we're going to talk about another topic that we know is big here in Denver, which is transit. Patty, Westward staff writer Katie Cheshire recently wrote this piece about this call from some business owners and residents in 5 Points to have the L line, the light rail line, removed from Welton Street. Patty, what is going on there?
It's a fascinating story, and I'd gotten this tip from a whistleblower, but the business district down on 5 Points is like, we have this light rail system that is blocking traffic, that doesn't have the stops it's supposed to, that's gotten rid of parking, and that 30 years ago, this was the first line it was put in, let's get 5 Points redeveloped. It's never really helped 5 Points at all. They've changed the loop, and they're like, get rid of it and let us have our neighborhood back. It's a fascinating story.
Well, it's something that I wasn't clear on was like what the plan was supposed to be for this light rail line. Because this is not a line that I've been on. And I saw in your story that the ridership seems to be quite low.
I was going to say, every time I'm down there, I've never even seen a train pass. And I'm down there a lot at shows and stuff.
But like, what was the plan for it to connect to? And we're like, why
Well,
didn't
ultimately,
that happen?
one of the plans would be this would have gone to the airport.
Right.
So this would have been an airport route from downtown. So,
which is so smart.
Which would have been smart. Yeah. And also, you just think it would be a way for people to go to what was supposed to be a happening part of town. Mm-hmm. The Rossonian was supposed to have been redeveloped 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe now. But it was supposed to be a way that you could help this part of, the historic Harlem of the West. It was supposed to bring people to 5 Points in a way that maybe made it easier for them and kept the businesses going. And instead, it's ruined a lot of those businesses.
But the 5 Points say the business owners, they say they don't like it. Is that what you heard?
Yeah. We've also heard from a few that they disagree with the bid. But the bid is like, we have to have events down here, but this light rail is doing us nothing.
I know that there's two factions in the business community too. There's like the business improvement district and there's Norman Harris, and like not everybody agrees on what to do. I guess I'm not super familiar with the latest is on that, but like who exactly was talking about this?
This was Norman Harris and the bid. So at the business meeting on October 23rd, they're talking about this.
So Norman Harris, who runs the
business district, right?
Music festival. Yeah. I think he's actually related to Robert Smith as well, the famous, one of the big richest black man in America. He runs Spangling.
He's the co-owner of Spangling with Robert Smith's relatives.
Yeah.
So these are people who want to. I mean, his father was a historic person on the stretch. These are people who want to honor the past, but get it moving again.
And I will say, every time I'm in Spangling, Norman is there working at his bar. So he is definitely, he's not like some like business owner that's not connected. He's always there. So I think it's really interesting that he is speaking out. But he had this quote that I thought was really interesting. And Katie's piece that said, the corridor feels like a testing ground for light rail rather than an actual investment in public transit. And I just thought that was an interesting perspective.
And 30 years ago, maybe it was. But 29th and Welton, that spot right by Channel 12, has been gone for a decade probably, but it's still there, taking up space.
Tons of empty storefronts. I mean, there's, to be fair, too, there are good businesses that are still trying to make it work over there for sure. It's not that they're not for lack of trying, but I don't know. This is just such an interesting thing. I think the thing I'm thinking about is like, do you think that these businesses just have fatigue from all of these unrealized projects or promises of light rail and like fast tracks, Patty? Because this has been a conversation since when I was born.
And then they had, it was about 5 or 6 years ago, they had a developer come in who wanted to help them out, and they wound up screwing up Coffee on the Points and some other businesses.
Oh, yeah.
So they have been victims of denied hopes, of denied funding. They've just had a really bad run of it for decades.
Well, this is the whole question about RTD right now, right? Is like broken promises. That's the whole narrative. There are so many Denverites who just feel like this agency and like the transit planners and whoever the powers that be are.
Voted and voted and voted for these things.
I mean, that'll be something interesting to watch on the when the ballots start coming in tonight and tomorrow, is how the RTD measure does the debrucing. Like, are we going to allow them to have more money to play with?
Well, or keep the same amount of money. Remember, it's not more. It's keeping the same amount. So they stand to lose $600 million. That is going to make it harder for them to do their job, but they also make it hard for them to do their jobs themselves.
Well, let's talk about one more transit-related issue outside of RTD, but this is something that's happening on the other side of the city, but it's another equally passionate community, and it's this group of cyclists who've reacted to the 29th Avenue bike lane, like the decisions on what's going to happen with that. Paul, what happened this weekend?
Well, this weekend there was this huge protest. The bike people are really upset about how the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, aka Dottie, has handled this project. Just to review, the background is Dottie had planned to do some street repairs on this particular stretch of West 29th Avenue. It's between Tennyson and Zuni. And then over the course of the last 8 months, they've slowly rolled back as the business owners were like, we're going to lose parking. We really would like to have this parking. And then some of the residents have been like, this is also a problem for us. We really like our parking. And then it turns out that some of these residents have actual like full-on driveways and garages that they
thanks to our listener that let us know.
Yeah, who did some deeper sleuthing than we did. And so now the bikers are just like, this sucks, basically. Like, the city says they want to have more bike infrastructure, that this is a priority, that this is a climate goal. This contributes to all of our efforts to like push the city forward and be more responsible with regards to the climate, and give people like, also safety is a huge issue on this stretch. Like this stretch, although there might not have been a lot of like bike and pedestrian accidents on this stretch, it is part of the high injury network that has been identified for improvements to safety infrastructure. And when Dottie has rolled back their plans for a protected bike lane, these people just felt betrayed. They felt upset. They felt vulnerable. And this weekend we saw what looked to me like hundreds of bikers.
Kind of surprised. Did you see these photos in Denverite?
No, and I'm very lucky because I was driving along 29th, going to the Lakeview Lounge at 7 a.m. and then coming back at 9 a.m. after sunrise. And I saw nothing on 29th, but I was thinking about the businesses that had the problems.
Here's my question for you, Patty. Do you remember a time when the bicycle community came out with this much of a show of force?
Yes, but I can't offhand remember when. And of course, I missed this, so I'm going to have to go back. By then, I was down south.
It's like hundreds of bikers out on the street. They were creating their own protected bike lane for the bike lane that does exist on 29th.
They had like party cups with like water in them or something to show you how easy it is to sort of like veer into the bike lane. I don't know how to explain it. You have to look at the photographs, but it was a really interesting way to produce a visual without having to say like someone got hurt here, but this is actually how someone could get hurt here if we just really don't have protection for cyclists.
Yeah, I mean, it's super vulnerable. I mean, normally we hear from these people in our inbox, in our replies on social media, bike people, like very, very passionate online.
Very passionate group.
This was a bit of a surprise. Like maybe there's some kind of like new political organizing through, I don't know, YIMBY Denver seems like they would be into this kind of thing, or the bike club.
Well, and that we got no advance notice. As I said, I would have noticed as I was driving out on Saturday. Yeah. But you also have the businesses who said the city didn't really talk to them. So communication going back to Jenna Griswold, is key. Transparency, communication, making sure you're always going to get complaints from neighborhood businesses, residents, whoever, but you want to be sure they had complete access to the discussions.
Yeah, it's complicated. We're going to keep watching it. It'll be interesting to see what happens with 29th and how that impacts or influences future decisions by Dottie, because I'm thinking about they've just expanded.
26th? Is there a bike lane on 26th?
Not sure.
I don't know, but that's another
that would
one
be
that's
a
like
good one to
thoroughfare.
have a bike lane on instead. I mean, that's the other thing. You have to. Every street cannot have a bike lane.
Yeah, but
Why not?
On some of those big thoroughfares.
Why not?
Because some people really need to get places. I mean, it's unrealistic. On our narrow neighborhood streets, every street can not have a bike lane, but you can have a bike lane within 3 blocks. Don't you think that's fair?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll debate that
It's
later.
not for us to hash it out.
They just recently expanded the Knox Court bike lane in my side of town, and I'm just interested to see how the neighborhood hasn't really reacted very much so far. But I mean, my hope is just that it slows it down in general, because I lived on that street for 8 years, and my car was totaled, my roommate was hit, all my roommates' mirrors were knocked off. So I don't like the idea of a bike lane as a protectant, but maybe it's a change in the use of the street. So we'll see. Thanks, Patty.
Bye. My pleasure.
See you next time.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
I'm James McComb, reporting live from home in my bathrobe and slippers. Tonight, we're talking Dunkin' Polar Peppermint Coffee. Gene's here with the latest. Gene, do you copy?
The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be.
And we're back. We're hearing from you, our brilliant and hilarious listeners. We've got an email. Paul, do you want to read this email?
Sure. This is an email from Patrick B. Patrick writes, I was listening to your conversation about Trump in Aurora, and how some attendees said they don't feel like they can talk about their political views as Republicans. This was a response to my recollections of the rally.
That's right.
Talking to some of the folks from Denver who were there. Anyway, Patrick writes, I'm generally conservative, but only vote Republican in presidential elections about half the time. I was never Trump in 2016, voted for Biden in 2020, and am reluctantly voting for Trump in 2024. I definitely don't feel like I can talk about politics with my neighbors or with others in Denver in general due to the intolerance of opposing viewpoints. Interesting. This is true on both sides, but it is especially true of Denverites with liberal points of view. And because of this, I would appreciate if you called me Patrick B, like you have the other couple of times you've mentioned something I said on the podcast. Thanks for writing in so much, Patrick. This is really great. Keep up the great work. Love the podcast, and you have my continued support as a subscriber. I've heard this from people for sure, that people feel like they don't feel like they can express themselves. And I do feel like people are super polarized and don't necessarily want to hear or listen to anyone from
like
different points of view. 100%. I agree with that.
Was there a piece like in the New York Times about this recently, about just the polarization in general, about just in general, people are having trouble talking to each other about even outside of not politics, but like specifically like this presidential race, not just that, but folks are really having a tough time. And I think there's a question about where we participate online can determine a lot about how we think when we're in the world, which is always a very different experience when we're face to face versus commenting to each other online.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting point, is like, what's the next step then? I mean, this election will say something, but what will the next election say about where we are?
Yeah,
interesting.
I do think that is a good point. I think that the media bubbles of the internet does create this situation where people don't really know how to talk to each other from different points of view. Like you hear in your bubble, like you mostly hear people's distillation or interpretation of the other side. And you hear about a lot of caricatures and people, like not real people. There's not a lot of people like me who have the appetite to go to the Trump rally and also go to like the Gaza protests on Auraria campus and listen to people and actually try to talk to them and hear what they say. You know, that's a pretty rare thing. And it takes skill. It takes a real open-mindedness to ask a question and not load it up with your own opinions or with your own perspective in such a way that the other person shuts down.
Yes, and I also think because of the way we interact online, we don't know how to interact in person to a certain extent, because online you can sit down and write a screed and think about it and delete it and distill it however you want. It's not a natural conversation point. And I've always struggled with this as someone that's tried to like have online discourse happening in some capacity. It's really hard to have an organic conversation when you're not talking to somebody, when you're responding. Responding is very different than talking and discussing. So I think that's just had a big impact on how we talk to each other.
Yeah, I think so too.
But
I would also encourage Patrick to just keep writing in, because someone like you, a neighbor, one of our neighbors here in Denver, for people to hear your perspective on things, I think it's great. It's nice to hear from you. And you're not alone. I was doing the data. I was doing the numbers just to think about, election night, prepare for what we're going to see, what would be interesting. And I was looking at the last 2 presidential votes in Denver, where Trump was on the ballot, just to get a sense, a benchmark. Do you remember? Do you have a guess?
I genuinely do not, Paul. I don't remember how this played out.
They were almost
Denver.
the exact same. Trump, Clinton, and then Trump, Biden was almost the exact same vote. It was 80-20.
That doesn't surprise me for Denver.
You think?
I'm not really.
Well, let me put it a different way. That means 1 in 5 Denver voters votes for Trump.
Oh, I guess that is more than
1 in 5 voters in Denver.
And this
is a
just,
Trump voter.
Is this just like Denver Metro? Are we talking
Denver
like
City and County?
Littleton. Okay, interesting.
I mean, you go further into the suburbs, it'd probably be even higher. Greg
and I have this conversation a lot because in terms of like our neighborhood, because we don't talk to our neighbors about politics. We talk to our neighbors about what's going on in the world, but a lot of our neighbors have very different experiences than we do. Like, our 3 closest neighbors came here from Mexico, and it's always interesting to like think about just like, I'm thinking about something I think you said about someone saying like how much Americans put into the government, like how much we expect the government to do. And I think about that a lot when I'm talking to my neighbors that have had different experiences with different governments.
Yeah.
So I guess that is kind of surprising if you say 1 in 5.
1 in 5 Denver voters, not 1 in 5 Denverites.
1 in 5
There's a lot of people
Denver
who don't
voters.
vote.
That's true.
But
interesting.
I know, that was like, wow. Didn't think about it that way.
I would have never thought about it that way. It's all to say what is going to happen. We don't know.
Do you have a guess?
No.
Trump or Harris?
I honestly, Paul, I have my ballot with me right now.
I need to vote too.
I mean, I don't want to say how I feel about the presidential part of it, but there's a lot of things I'm concerned about that I have not decided on yet.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I feel the same way.
You'll hear first from us when we're watching these results roll in and sharing what we know tomorrow morning.
Wait, can we do one more quick listener response?
Oh, sure.
Because we had that really fun show last week about viral moments, Colorado's biggest viral moments, which I loved that. I thought of so many more after the recording.
Too.
I was like, we didn't talk about the nurses in the pandemic.
Oh my God. We didn't talk about the 2 people on I-70 on their Lime scooter, just cruising and looking like they were in love while also battling a rainstorm.
That was just such a feel good. It was hilarious.
It was a really fun show, and I loved having David Gilbert and Justine Sandoval's perspectives on this. But we did get a comment.
Yes, from a listener, Kyle C.
You might know him, Kyle C. He's sometimes on 9 News. He sent me a very sweet text that said, laughed out loud at the Fresh Prince of Den-Bear recap this morning. Fun fact, those realtors served me with an intent to sue over our coverage. Additional fun fact, they did not actually sue.
Hilarious.
Also, what? We can I want to put a link to Kyle's coverage of this because he was just like presented without comment. Here's a video. I think you all can make your own decisions for yourselves about how ridiculous this is.
It really is.
Yo home to Denver.
Yeah, I do. I watched the whole thing. You all said it was too cringy to watch again. I watched it all afterwards. It was.
My God. Yo
I
home.
laughed the whole time.
Sell you later. So bad.
They were just like those realtors. Like,
just
how do you do it? How do you let the camera shoot you doing this?
Because you think you're doing something really cool.
You think you're doing it. I guess so. My God.
All right.
What a beautiful moment.
It was a fun moment to relive for sure. That was fun, Paul. I'm gearing up. We're getting ready to do this again, but thanks for joining me.
We'll see you on the other side.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to say congratulations to our senior account executive, Maggie Azzolini, for running the New York City Marathon. You can also rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya! From Secretary of State Jenna Griswold. That's such a big one.